Rain lashed against the glass walls of JFK's private terminal like icy blades, each gust screeching like the wail of a world on the brink of collapse. Clara Hayes dragged her feet across the gleaming marble floor, her worn-out Dansko nursing shoes squeaking awkwardly against the luxury that surrounded her. The acrid smell of burnt coffee from the paper cup in her hand mixed with the bone-chilling air that seeped through her thin coat. The callus on her finger scraped against the rim of the cup, and the dark circles under her eyes, barely hidden by hastily applied mascara, spoke volumes. 36 hours in the pediatric oncology ward, holding fragile little fighters battling for their lives, had drained every ounce of strength she had. But in her mind, only one thought pulsed. Just a few more hours, Clara. Hang in there. For Liam. For a life without overdue bills. She clutched her phone tightly, the digital ticket on the screen blurry from the sweat on her palms. 2 years of surviving on instant noodles, skipping new clothes, scraping by just for this flight to San Francisco, for a shot at a research scholarship, a way out of debt, a chance to get Liam into med school. The terminal buzzed with chaos, the storm outside threatening to swallow New York whole. A man in a sleek black suit, Bluetooth in his ear, came barreling toward her. "Ms. Vance, hurry. The plane's taking off." Clara blinked. "No, I'm Hayes." But before she could explain, he shoved her through the security gate and onto a gleaming private jet. The door slammed shut with a hiss like fate slicing its way through her life. The engines roared, tearing through the night. Inside the minimalist cabin, a man sat alone, commanding the leather seat, like the eye of a quiet storm. Julian Croft. His eyes were the color of a winter sky before the snow cold, endless like they held a frozen ocean inside. He frowned, his voice as sharp as a blade. "You're not Isabel." Clara stammered, heart pounding so loudly it drowned her words. I was mistaken. I'm supposed to be flying to San Francisco." He waved her off, voice dry as sandpaper. "We're not going to San Francisco. We're headed to Italy." Clara froze the floor, dropping out from under her world. No, my interview," she whispered, her voice cracking like a falling star, swallowed by darkness. The storm outside howled, but the silence inside the jet was more terrifying. Clara clutched her old backpack, her mind racing, Liam, the children at the hospital, the dream unraveling before her. Julian stared out the window, as if running from something greater than the storm. "You ruined my day," he said, still not looking at her. Clara bit her lip, holding back tears. "And you just ruined my entire life." But then their eyes met, and in that brief moment, a spark flickered in the darkness, like two lost planets colliding in a chaotic universe. The villa on Lake Como rose like a glass palace, its transparent walls revealing a shimmering lake view, but to Clara, it felt like a sterile, gilded cage. She stood before the massive window, feeling exposed, as if on display, in a cold gallery where every gaze could see straight through her. The ticking of the wall clock echoed down the empty hallway like the heartbeat of a house devoid of life. Clara's worn nursing shoes creaked against the polished wooden floor, each step a reminder of how out of place she was. Her chance in San Francisco had vanished into thin air. She thought of Liam, of the pride in his smile when she told him about the scholarship. Now she just wanted to scream, but exhaustion had swallowed her voice whole. Julian sat in an armchair, gaze distant, a glass of wine in his hand that he never drank, as if hiding behind it. Clara, with a nurse's instinct, noticed the slight tremble in his fingers when he thought no one was watching, and his eyes, like a frozen lake, held a sorrow too deep to measure. She felt no anger, though her heart was heavy. Instead, she quietly stepped closer, her movements gentle, like caring for a sleeping patient. She placed a glass of water on the table beside him without a word, the condensation forming a perfect circle on the dark wood. Julian looked up startled, as if this small act were a language he'd never known. He was used to fear or demands from people, not simple kindness. They began to talk, not forced small talk, but something real. Clara spoke about her work, her voice steady, yet full of emotion. There's a boy, Sam, at the hospital. He draws superheroes on his IV bags. Says that makes the medicine superpowered. She smiled, eyes shimmering, carrying Sam's quiet bravery with her. Julian stayed silent, then offered a fragment of something broken. I once had a friend. He believed in impossible things too. His voice faltered, as if brushing against an old wound. Clara didn't press. She simply nodded, letting the silence between them become a fragile bridge, not a wall of ice. The villa, with all its cold beauty, suddenly felt less suffocating. Clara looked out toward the lake, where the moonlight shattered on the surface like scattered pieces of hope. Julian looked at her, not as an intruder now, but as a flicker of light seeping into his darkness. "You're not like Isabel," he said, almost a whisper. Clara shrugged gently, a soft smile on her lips. "Good. I'm not trying to be." And in that moment, they were no longer a billionaire and a nurse, but two human beings standing at the edge of something quietly opening where the light had just begun to come through. Clara wandered through the villa, her nursing shoes squeaking on the wooden floor, as if trying to escape the suffocating grip of glass walls. She pushed open a heavy wooden door and stepped into Julian's architectural studio, a forgotten sanctuary thick with the scent of old wood paper and dust. Faint light filtered through the windows, casting soft shadows on rolled-up blueprints, half-finished models, and stacks of books. She ran her fingers over one of the models, tracing its sharp lines, feeling the soul of the creator frozen in time. And then she saw it, a model of the Elysian Tower, stunning yet haunting. Next to it, a stack of old newspaper clippings. One headline hit her like a blow: Elysian tragedy architect David Chen killed. Clara held her breath, as if she had just uncovered a forbidden secret. Julian entered his shadow, stretching across the floor, his voice cold and clipped. "You're not supposed to be in here." But his eyes wavered like a lake rippling under the wind. Clara turned to him unflinching. "I didn't mean to intrude, but I see you in all of this." She gestured to the model, her gaze filled not with curiosity, but with deep understanding, as if she saw the wound beneath the marble. Julian opened his mouth to snap, but her eyes stopped him. He saw his pain echoed in hers like two still lakes reflecting one another. He began to speak, his voice halting as if every word were a shard of broken glass. Flashbacks flickered David's laughter in the office at 3 a.m. The smell of thick coffee, then the sharp wail of an ambulance ripping through the night. I ignored the warnings, the little details, all for deadlines, for reputation, and David paid the price. Clara said nothing, just stepped closer, her voice soft but unwavering. "Last week, I lost a patient, Lily. I sat with her every day, but when she slipped away, I just stood there helpless. The hardest part was the silence. Walking past her empty room the next day, everything was the same, except she was gone." Julian looked at her, and the ice that encased him began to crack, like a frozen lake melting under spring sun. "You don't know me," he said, but it wasn't an accusation anymore. Clara offered a bittersweet smile. "I know enough to see that you're not the man in those articles. You're the one who stayed, and that's heavier than any tower you ever built." They stood among models and memories, saying nothing more. But in the silence, something invisible began to form a thread, connecting two wounded souls. No longer a billionaire and a nurse, just two people finding comfort in each other's scars. Julian watched her as she left, and for the first time in a year, he felt the urge to pick up a pencil, like a beam of light had slipped through a long, sealed crack. The wall of ice between Clara and Julian melted slowly but surely. One morning, with sunlight dancing across Lake Como, Clara sat quietly in the villa's garden, holding a cup of cold tea. Julian approached, no longer cloaked in aloofness, but carrying a trace of awkward humility. "If I ruined your trip," he said, voice earnest, almost pleading, "at least let me show you the true beauty of this place." Clara hesitated, but something in his eyes, like the sky after a storm, made her nod, her heart fluttering. They boarded a vintage Riva boat, gliding across the water. A cool breeze brushed Clara's skin, and the gentle lapping of waves against the hull beat like the heart of a world slowly waking up. Sunlight scattered across the lake like spilled diamonds. Julian took the wheel, his hair tousled by the wind, and for the first time, Clara saw him smile, a real smile, unforced and sincere, as though he had reclaimed a part of himself. They didn't go to a Michelin-starred restaurant. Instead, Julian led her down a narrow alley in Bellagio to a family-run eatery, the air thick with the scent of toasted bread and garlic. The plump, boisterous owner pinched Julian's cheek and called him Bambino in Italian. He responded fluently, warmly, like he belonged there. They sat down amidst the chatter and laughter of locals. Clara opened up her voice, hesitant. "I used to dream about curing cancer. But now, I just hope Liam can finish med school without debt." Dreams shrink when reality grows bigger. Julian looked out at the lake, the sunset blazing red. "I used to dream in glass and steel. Now every blueprint I touch feels heavy, the weight of what can go wrong." His voice dropped more to himself than to her. Clara nodded, as if she understood that invisible fear. On the way back, the boat drifted slowly through the sunset. Their hands brushed against each other on the wooden rail, and neither of them pulled away. It wasn't a handhold. It was a recognition, as if two separate currents had found the same river. Clara's heart raced, not from fear, but from something new and alive. Julian looked at her, his gaze now the light of early spring. "You remind me the world isn't only darkness," he said almost in a whisper. Clara smiled, the breeze tugging at her hair. "And you remind me that sometimes getting lost is how we find our way." They didn't say more, but the lake reflected their smiles, like an unspoken promise, shimmering beneath the glow of the fading sun. The next morning, Clara woke with a rare smile, the first in years. She stood by the villa's window, watching Lake Como shimmer under the sunlight, feeling as though her heart was reflecting that same light. Julian's smile on the boat, their hands brushing at sunset, it had felt like a fragile promise. But that peace shattered as quickly as a dream. Julian entered the room, his face stormy, clutching his phone tightly. His assistant stood in the corner, reading aloud a venomous tabloid headline: "Tragic tycoon finds a new plaything mystery girl spotted with Julian Croft." Clara felt the blood drain from her face, as if someone had ripped the veil off their private moment. A paparazzo with a telephoto lens had turned something intimate into clickbait. Julian slammed his fist on the table, the water glass rattling violently. "I said no press near this property," he shouted, though the fury seemed aimed more at himself. Clara stood frozen, feeling exposed to the entire world. Not the San Francisco dream, this was worse. This was the moment she let herself hope, now torn to pieces. The fairy tale was over. Midnight had struck. She didn't cry, but a chill spread through her chest, like frost cutting into a summer day. Then Julian's phone rang. He answered, his knuckles white. Clara only caught fragments, but Isabel Vance's voice, velvet, soaked in acid, cut through the air. "Julian, are you really making a fool of yourself over some small-town nurse? If you don't come back, I'll make sure the world knows she's just a gold digger exploiting your tragedy." Clara turned away. She didn't need to hear more. The words weren't just daggers. At Julian, they tore through her integrity. She who had stayed awake through endless nights for sick children was now reduced to a gold digger. The injustice choked her. Julian hung up, but wouldn't meet her eyes. "You should go," he said, hollow, like someone surrendering to a world he could no longer fight. Clara nodded. She didn't argue. She returned to her room and began packing. Each shirt folded felt like a farewell to a fleeting dream. She called Liam, ready to break, but his voice came through firm and unwavering. "Clara, since when do you let bullies win? You're the strongest person I know." His words cut through the darkness like a beam of light. Clara paused, staring at her reflection. The woman in the mirror wasn't a gold digger. She was Clara Hayes, the woman who held children through their pain, who stood tall through every loss. She clenched her fists, a decision burning in her chest. She wasn't going to run. Not this time. Clara folded her clothes mechanically, each shirt tucked into her worn backpack, like a quiet goodbye to her days at Lake Como. The backpack scuffed. Old reminded her of all the years she lived for Liam, for her patience, for a dream that now seemed shattered. Julian had arranged a flight home for her. The ticket sat on the table, like a sentence. She called Liam, her voice trembling, ready to spill every bit of pain. But he cut her off, firm and unwavering. "Since when do we let bullies win, Clara? You taught me to fight." His words struck like a match in the darkness, igniting strength she thought she'd lost. Clara looked into the mirror and saw a woman who would not yield. She clenched her fists. This was not how her story would end. She wouldn't leave like a loser. She found Julian in his architectural studio, standing among unfinished models, his gaze lost like a ship without a compass. Clara walked in, without knocking, without asking, claiming space. "Julian," she said, her voice calm but sharp, like a blade slicing through the storm. "That fortress you built, it wasn't to protect you from the world. It's been your prison. And now you are handing the key to Isabel, letting her and the world you hate push me away. The one person who actually sees you. Not a headline." Julian stared at her, stunned, as if she had just turned on the light in a room he hadn't realized was dark. He wanted to argue, but her words pierced his armor like sunlight through fog. He thought of David, the sleepless nights, sketching blueprints, the ambulance siren, the guilt that crushed him ever since. Clara stood firm, not yelling, not crying, but steady, like a lighthouse in the storm. "You don't understand," he muttered, but his voice cracked, betraying his doubt in his own defense. Clara stepped closer, her gaze unwavering. "I understand enough. You're not the man they write about. You're the one who built towers, and you can rebuild yourself, but you have to choose." Julian looked at her, truly looked, not as a mistake, as a lifeline. He realized he had been running for too long, letting fear and Isabel dictate his every move. "I don't want to lose you," he said, his voice breaking like shedding the last of his defenses. Clara smiled, not a smile of triumph, but of light found in darkness. "Then don't let me go." They stood between models and memories, not touching, but the space between them had vanished. For the first time in a year, Julian felt the weight lift from his shoulders, felt like he could finally breathe again. Julian knew that an apology wouldn't be enough. He had to act. In the architectural studio, the setting sun streamed through the windows, casting a golden glow over old blueprints like an invitation from a new world. He picked up his phone and called the dean of the scholarship program in San Francisco, an old family friend. His voice was steady, not pleading but full of respect. "I'm not asking for a favor. I'm asking for Clara Hayes to have 15 minutes, a video interview. Her talent will speak for itself." Clara stood at the door, hearing every word, her heart pounding so hard it could burst. This wasn't about money or influence. This was his absolute belief in her, the one thing she needed most. When he turned around, his eyes no longer held the chill of winter skies. They were the light of early spring. "I haven't been living, Clara," he said, his voice breaking as if shedding his final layer of armor. "I've been haunted by my own life. And then you walked in and opened every window. You let the sunlight in." Tears slid down Clara's cheeks, not from pain, but from relief, like a weight had finally been lifted from her chest. She stepped toward him, and they shared their first kiss. Not fiery, but gentle, with the salt of her tears and the quiet vow in his heart. It wasn't a flame, it was the warmth of a home rediscovered. They sat in the studio, not speaking, just being. Julian picked up a pencil, his fingers brushing across paper, sketching for the first time in months. Clara watched him, not as a reclusive billionaire, but as an artist reclaiming his fire. She touched his hand gently, the same way she used to comfort children through their pain. "We're going to be okay," she said, not a question. Julian nodded, and for the first time, he believed it. That moment was healing. Clara was no longer the exhausted nurse. She was a woman daring to dream again, daring to hope. Julian no longer hid in the shadows of his past. He was sketching the outlines of a future. The studio, once a forgotten sanctuary, had become the birthplace of something new, like a blueprint still incomplete, but full of promise. They didn't speak of love or make grand declarations. The silence between them brimmed with hope, like a still lake reflecting the moonlight. Clara looked out the window and saw Lake Como shimmer, and for the first time, it didn't feel like a gilded cage. It felt like somewhere she could belong next to Julian, on a journey that was only just beginning. 6 months passed, like a film, in fast forward. Clara was now in a lab in San Francisco, her face glowing under bright white lights, eyes focused the way they used to be when caring for pediatric patients, now immersed in research, inching closer to her dream. Julian was in New York, standing before a team of architects, his voice filled with passion as he unveiled plans for a non-profit pediatric oncology hospital, drawn from the stories Clara had shared about brave young patients. Late-night video calls, exhausted but happy laughter through pixelated screens, cold coffee beside laptops. Their love wasn't a blazing fire. It was a steady flame, burning across distance and time like two stars finally finding each other in the galaxy. The final scene unfolds in San Francisco. Clara opens the door to her modest apartment, the smell of curry filling the air, the sound of keys jingling in the lock like a melody of everyday life. She wears a simple gray sweater, her hair tied back high, not the exhausted nurse anymore, but a woman glowing with renewed life. Julian stands outside. No luxury suit, just a deep blue sweater, and in his hand a single white gardenia. A small detail they once mentioned by Lake Como, when Clara said she loved its understated elegance. He hadn't arrived by private jet, just a man under the street lamp waiting with a soft smile. "I brought you a flower," he says, his voice warm, the smile glowing in his eyes. Clara looks at the bloom smiles and her fingers graze its delicate petals. It's beautiful. Julian steps closer, his gaze deep, as if holding an entire sky. Not as beautiful as the life we're going to build. They don't kiss passionately, no grand displays. Instead, they hold hands, their shadows stretching across the sidewalk beneath the amber glow of the streetlight, walking down an ordinary street where the sounds of traffic and wind blend into a quiet harmony. Their story isn't a fairy tale with castles or crowns. It's a blueprint for real life, where everyday moments, a flower, a held hand, a smile beneath the light, are the ultimate kind of luxury. Their fingers fit, not like two halves of one whole, but like two architects ready to build something new, strong, and real. Clara and Julian walk forward, making no grand promises, but with every step they lay down another brick solid, meaningful. Under the street lamp, they don't just hold hands, they hold a future where simplicity is the foundation of a lasting love, like a home built from the heart. If you felt something in Clara and Julian's story, tap that heart, hit like, and subscribe to Toch Story so you don't miss the next emotional journey.